Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jobs Podcast, a place where emergency services can anonymously share their funny stories, rants, and accolades. Remember, you power this mission to make emergency service workers feel heard and feel less alone. And if you do have a story to tell, you can email in at thejobpod25@gmail.com or send me a message or voice note on Instagram at the Jobs Podcast or at jdartmoor. Today, I'm joined by the magnificent and head of Blue Life Lifestyle, Ian Cooke. So, Ian, how the hell are you, mate?
Mate, I'm good. I'm good, thank you. Thanks very much for having me on. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a great idea, this podcast. I think it gives people a voice, which is ultimately sometimes what the job can try and take away. And I think it's a great concept. I'm looking forward to it.
I appreciate that, mate. Yeah. So I started this podcast as like a bit of a, you know what? I was getting a lot of people messaging me with the kind of the rants and the funny stories and stuff. So you thought, you know what? Why not bring them to the wider population of emergency service workers? Like I said in the intro, it's to make people feel less alone. And when
Yeah.
somebody shares a story, often then that resonates with other people. So then other people share their stories as well. And I actually had a Bobby the other day turn around to me and say, as a result of listening to this podcast and you being that kind of voice to rant to, you've actually helped me through some quite nasty shifts and some quite nasty incidents. So I mean, that's awesome, isn't it? That's really nice. And plus as well, Ian, with what you do with Blue Dot Lifestyle, you support officers in that much more one-to-one level too. So why don't you just detail a little bit about what your platform is and what service you offer, mate?
Yeah, so I mean, Blue Dot Lifestyle, it's kind of really about the health and well-being of police officers and emergency service workers. And ultimately, what we look to do is to help people gain control. I think everybody in the job, whether you're a police officer, whether you're a paramedic, whether you're a firefighter, what you're looking for is a bit of control around the chaos of the job. And for a lot of people, the job takes over. And before you know it, the person that you were before the job, you no longer are when you're in the job. You either have lost a little bit of structure and routine, you maybe have gained a little bit of weight, you don't feel confident in yourself, or you're not quite where you want to be. And we offer a bespoke service whereby people will come and be part of our community, and we'll work one-to-one with people to help build a lifestyle that's sustainable and gives people the tools to be able to do it for the rest of their life. That's ultimately what it's all about. We're not a quick fix program. We're not just a training and nutrition program. We are people that are going to delve into your energy, your sleep, your recovery, your routine, your structure. Because I think if you leave one on the table, you're leaving a lot on the table. And I don't want people to do that. My background really was I've been that person that's kind of let the job take over massively. If you'd have cut me open probably 3 or 4 years into my service, I'd have bled blue massively. But I also was having massive issues in my own lifestyle, whereby the job took over to a point where I wasn't happy who I was.
Mhm.
I've got a lived experience, and we've built a great team around us at Blue Dot Lifestyle, whereby we've got a psychological therapist in the program. We've got 3 other coaches that have all got lived experiences, emergency service workers. We've got a wonderful community of like 160 other emergency service workers that are all in our program. And I've found, and you've probably found this in your podcast, community is what builds everything. Um,
100%.
and when somebody comes along and they've got a problem and have experienced something in the job, it's really great to kind of go, you know what, I've experienced that as well, and this is how I've coped. Yes, we've got a one-to-one whereby you're working individually with your own coach, and we develop, your lifestyle around your lifestyle in the job. But to also have that ability to kind of share your experiences with other emergency service workers is huge.
It's a massive thing that, like you said, community is. I think community is what keeps a lot of people in the jobs as well. So even if even if they're not particularly happy, if they get on a good block or they have a couple of people on their block, which really makes that shift, you're able to withstand so much of the crap which gets thrown your way, either by the incidents what you deal with or the organization and everything else. So, mate, I think it's absolutely cracking in what you're doing. What we'll do is we'll put all your links and everything else to your pages and stuff in the description for this podcast. But that actually leads us on quite well, actually, mate, to the story of the week. So normally what we do is the story of the week, I'll look online or I'll see something, I'll think, that's quite a good little talking point. But just before we started recording, we were talking about the different stories we could discuss. And then you mentioned about the police constable's media release, and how it almost ignores the police sickness and retention issues. So why don't you just fill us in a bit more about that, mate?
Yeah, so I mean, the one thing I will say, this isn't me trying to discredit any of the chief constables. This isn't me trying to be negative. This is just me as a former police officer and somebody who really does care about the health and well-being of police officers and the staff, picking up on something that I think we'll all resonate with. So when any new chief constable comes in, I think we all know what's coming. Change is definitely coming. A reinvention of the wheel,
Mhm.
and we know that things are probably going to get disrupted. But the one thing that I've noticed is that whenever a new chief constable does a press release, the one thing that doesn't really ever get talked about is the officers and the staff, and the real issues that they're probably facing. Because without staff being present at work and being looked after, you haven't got a police service. Um, but what you'll find is that on the police, uh, chief constables will talk about trust and confidence. We're going to build trust and confidence. We're going to build uh, a service that people can believe in, and they're all like buzzwords that I think are a narrative that they want to put out to the public. And I know there will be an internal message that will also go out, but I do think the public need to realise and understand that there are issues in relation to well-being. There are issues in relation to sickness and how officers are feeling. And I think it would be absolutely amazing for a chief constable just to come out to the public and say, my priority is my officers and my staff. And I'm going to make sure that I give them everything I've got. I'm going to make sure that we look after the health and the well-being. And yes, our budgets are tight, but I'm going to make sure that I look after them, because if they're well looked after, you'll be well looked after. But it just doesn't seem to happen. And I don't know whether it's the chief constables maybe looking at what maybe the public want to hear. Maybe the public aren't interested in police officers and staff being, having good well-being, and maybe that's like maybe looking at, and the chief constables are thinking, well, what, can I say that? Is that going to go down well? But for me, it'd go down amazingly well with your staff. To have that publicly said that I'm going to look after you and I'm going to make sure that you've got a voice and you're going to be looked after and you're going to have that health and well-being supported, I think it'd go down fantastically well. But it just doesn't seem to ever come across.
One of the biggest things what I get sent through to me and the messages I receive, it's to do with the organization, do with the management. Very rarely do I get a message off of Bobby saying, I'm resigning because of this particular incident, or I'm resigning because of the way the public treat me. It all compounds, of course, but the main thing I hear is I don't feel supported by the organization. If anything, if I'm really struggling, the organization puts pressure on me to then go back out and to, it's the needs of the organization over the needs of the individual. Now, of course, I understand to an extent as to why the organization does that. But if you are showing your workforce that they don't matter, they're just a number, and the organization doesn't care, then you're very quickly not going to have a workforce left. So, with the chief constables turning around and thinking, do I address the issues with staff, or do I say what the public want to hear? You are almost addressing the symptom of the problem without addressing the problem. Because naturally, if cops feel more supported and more looked after by their bosses and by their management and superiors, you will then get a better service to the public, because the officers feel that they are supported in their job and they want to do a good job, and they're not as burnt out. They're not as struggling as much with workloads and PTSD and shifts and everything else. And I think when it comes to leadership, is we're too quick to promote people who can who can't really manage. They're not great at leading people. They get put into leadership positions, but they do so because they can pass an exam and they can say the right things and they can pass a board,
Yeah,
rather than, okay, well, if we change that criteria and say, okay, well, what do your staff actually think about your leadership? And we will promote you on that. I think we'd see a massively different police force overnight. And I think as a result of that, the positive benefit of that would then trickle down and show the public the service which the public obviously want. Because I know they can turn around and say, "Oh, we don't care. The public don't care about the police service, etc." But they definitely care if there was none, and if if they pick up 999, and that's one thing I am really worried about is because the amount of police officers leaving as a result of the organisations not really perceiving, giving the perception that they don't really care about them. I'm really worried that eventually there's just going to be no police left. So then the public are really going to suffer, and then the the issues what the organisation hasn't addressed for the sake of wanting to appear politically correct in the eyes of the public and not upset them, you've actually ignored the fundamental workforce. This video was sponsored by my best-selling police memoir, The Jobs Fuck Secret Diary of a Police Officer. After 10 years in the police service, I finally left and I decided I need to speak out. This book does a deep dive into police corruption, the real reason why the police force is falling apart, and things you will never hear in the mainstream media. You can check it out in the link in the description of this video. You could also grab some merchandise and support me on Patreon. And now, without further ado, enjoy the video. Behind what would help, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think that the biggest problem is that they maybe don't want to say it in public because we're embarrassed about what it is. If you go, you know what, I'm going to look after the health and well-being and welfare of my officers and my staff. One of the questions that might come back is, well, can you just elaborate on why you need to do that? Immediately,
what's wrong with them already?
Yeah, and it becomes a very, very difficult conversation. However, I think it would be exactly the right thing to do, because I think what you're doing is you're saying to the officers and staff, look, I'm here. I recognise that that we need to do better, and I want to do better for you. And I think immediately what you do is you remove the disconnect, because that's where it is. There's a massive disconnect, from the top to the bottom. And if we can bridge that gap a little bit further, I think you create a better culture in policing. And it does need to get better. I mean, one of the best quotes ever that I've heard in terms of leadership, and I think this is policing in general, is Simon Sinek, and it's leadership is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in your charge.
I fucking love Simon Sinek. I can listen to that guy talk all day. He is amazing.
What a great quote. And I think sadly, that is where policing's lost itself a little bit. We're that worried and concerned about what we look like to the public and maybe what we look like to the politicians. We forget about the fact that, you get promoted because you probably want to lead people, and we forget about it. When you're at the top, you've got a lot of people underneath you that, want your support and want your guidance. And I think sometimes we forgot about that. And I look, the internal message, like I say, might well be on the intranets across the, different forces. It might well be, I'm going to look after your health and well-being. I don't know, because I'm not privy to it. But just as a member of the public now, I would love it if a chief constable was to come out and just go, you know what, no, I'm going to look after the health and well-being of my officers and my staff because I genuinely care about it, and it's something that, we need to get right. I just think it'd be a wonderful message to send out, rather than the buzzwords of what does come out.
I think it'd certainly be a massive thing for police morale and for the cops on the ground feeling that they are supported from the top. Because if one of you, I mean, yeah, if a supervisor gives you a pat on the back and says good job, then that's one thing. But if you get one of the big bosses who knows your name, like one of my old superintendents knew everyone by name. First name, don't matter if you were there for 5 minutes or for 20 years, knew everyone by name. And it made you respect them so much more because you're like, okay, well, you are here for me. And this officer, my last superintendent, he would go out on a night shift, on a Friday night shift, and get crewed up with a cop because he never wanted to lose that connection with the bobbies. He was always that. And you know what? For whatever people's criticisms of him might be in relation to his procedures and politics, you couldn't ever fault him for that because he still kept his toe in the water when it came to frontline policing. And I think, unfortunately, what happens is the bosses get so high up the ladder, it becomes a case of not what do the officers want, but what is beneficial to me and therefore what is beneficial to the organisation. And like I said, that's where that massive disconnect can then of course, come in.
I don't know whether you saw, mate. Andy Profit is the chief constable, I think, of Hertfordshire, I think, and he regularly goes out with
That's good.
the officers. Recently locked somebody up.
I think I saw that. Yeah.
And to me, what that highlights is, well, you know what, I'm here with you. I don't need to be, and he doesn't. No chief constable needs to be doing it. But I think it's quite a sensible thing to do, because what it
Mhm.
does is it allows you to see the challenges, and then you know what, it also removes that disconnect massively, because they can see that you're willing to go and do these things. And I think it's a massive kudos to him, actually, that he's done that. And I'm not suggesting that that should be, something that he's doing every week, because he's going to have different challenges, and every chief constable is going to have different challenges that they're going to have to face. But to do it every now and again, and to listen to your officers and listen to your staff, and to be aware of what's going on, I think is fantastic.
Do you think that would help the disconnect if senior officers had to go out actually on shift and be on response for the day every month, like one shift a month or something like that?
I did a post on it on Instagram, and that was one of the things that I said. To me, if you're a head of a department, how can you be the head of the department if you don't know what the day to day running's like?
Yeah.
We all know that as a superintendent, there is no way that your chief inspector is going to come to you and tell you what's really going on, because it would make the chief inspector probably look bad.
Yeah.
The inspector is not going to go to the chief inspector and go, we've got some massive issues here. The X, Y, and Z is really bad, because the chief inspector is going to go to the inspector. Well, what are you doing about it?
Mhm.
Everybody's scared of their own shadow. And this is where the leadership has gone horribly wrong, because we should be open and transparent and we talk about code of ethics in policing, honesty, integrity. But sadly, the way the leadership structure and the rant structure goes, we're actually that concerned about what we're going to look like that we don't talk. Like, for example, one of the arguments was that one of the exec teams that I spoke to, they said, "Well, we do go into with the briefings," and I said, "Well, no one's going to come and say to you what's really going on ever."
No.
Do you know what I mean? Because nobody's going to put their hand up. There's no way that the inspector of that team's going to go, "Well, you know what, boss or mom, this is what's going on, and we've got a major problem here," because they're that concerned about how that's going to be interpreted.
Mhm.
I think that is where the problem lies. We've got to be able to hold the mirror up to ourselves as an organisation and say, you know what, there are some problems here, and we've got to work together and be open and transparent about it, so we can actually make a change. Because if we keep lying to ourselves and saying that it's not, the problem's just going to get worse.
Well, I remember just what you were saying then about the rank structure and everything else, and everyone not wanting to say something. I remember our chief constable used to visit the stations, and they'd go into briefing, and he'd want the response bobbies to go in, and the inspectors, and to just tell him how it was and tell him what was going on. And if you were picked to go in, you'd get a whisper in your ear off a senior manager saying, "Tell him everything's okay. Don't tell him what's wrong." And it's like, no, but that's why they're here. They want to know the issues, but you don't want to say it, because if I say it's bad, then that looks bad on you.
Yeah,
So I think if it doesn't need to go up that kind of chain of command, then we actually say to the senior leaders, "You are on response on Friday night. You are on response on a Tuesday evening. No matter what rank you are, then you're always keeping." One, I think that'd be good for the morale of the officers, because they know they've got that senior leader there. Two, it means that the issues are raised directly with them, rather than needing to go up the chain of command and get watered down. Um, and I just think it keeps it destroys that disconnect, because the senior leaders are rubbing shoulders with the bobbies on the ground,
yeah,
and they are wrestling with somebody on a Friday night, or they are talking to someone who's on a bridge or whatever, the day-to-day stuff what you have to deal with. But yeah, I think we could absolutely agree on that, mate. And I think everyone listening to that would be cheering. Maybe some senior leadership team, if they listen to that, might be going, "Oh shit, I can't remember if my body armor fits or not." But hey, okay. If you enjoy these kind of conversations, then why not become a Patreon? You can support me for as little as $4.99 a month. As a Patreon, you'll get advanced access to videos, articles, behind the scenes footage, and more. For just the price of a coffee a month, you can help me bring these important conversations to the world. Just simply click the link in the description or scan this QR code right here. So, Ian, we're going to move on to now the rants and stories aspect of this podcast. And we fucking love this bit. So, this is the part where people message in with their funny stories, their accolades, their, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's not always good. And they are very much looking forward to hearing your thoughts and feelings surrounding these different things. And if you do have a story you want to send in, like I said, you can Instagram me, the Jobs Fuck Podcast, or email me at thejobpod25@gmail.com. Everything is anonymized. So, this one was sent through to me. I just started listening to your podcast and it resonates so much. I've been in the job for 10 years now. It's changed beyond our recognition. One story you'll chuckle at is I managed to parver my minge. The cuffs had come undone, and as I sat in the car, the cuff got on the top of the parver holster, and Bob's your uncle. My then skipper has never forgotten that day, and and I had immensely painful lips. I mean, fucking painful. My colleagues dined out on that for years, still do. I actually mentioned that to a friend of mine who's in the job, and she told me it's happened to her as well. Said she had to put something on herself, and for the rest of the day, she's walking around with bloody spicy flaps. So it's like, do you think that there needs to be some kind of health and safety thing when it comes to ladies and handcuffs and parver and potentially where it's fucking pointed?
Well, I mean, I've got to admit, I've never heard anything like that, so I can't say. I can't imagine it's very, very common. But yeah, I can imagine it's painful. I mean, I got parvered by a colleague, um, and it's horrific.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
it isn't nice, and I can imagine in that particular area, it probably wouldn't be very nice at all. Um, but I don't know if there's anything you can really do, unless you lock your cuffs
yeah.
when you're in your pouch. Maybe I don't know. So they're not moving a bit. I don't know. But yeah,
That's cast iron underwear. I think might be part of
yeah,
it.
well, yeah, definitely. But
Well, well, to the officer who sent that in, thank you very much for sending me that. Before, like Ian said, prior to hearing that story, I didn't even know that was possible. So I hope your lips have recovered. That's all I can say. Okay, so we have one next one, which is a voice note from an officer. So let's just play this.
I don't know you, but I saw the video about I was the trim officer being treated really badly, and I just wanted to not get my experience, but share it with you just because I know you know already. But yeah, 2023, October 19th, 2023, basically at my home train station, I witnessed a geezer get hit by a train. He jumped, and I had to deal, and I was already suffering with PTSD, which we didn't know at that point. And then I dealt with that, and then basically I won't get into it, but I had to go through the station many times, the same station, because I'm on the way to work. I don't have a driving license. Anyway, finally, like my work's suffering and all this stuff, and I'm trying to get together. I'm trying to work myself through this and trying to do stuff, put up, shut up, but I'm still talking to people about my mental health from before, and that's taking its time. Anyway, basically, finally, I can't remember what it was. I think it was December 11th that year as well. I was, my supervisor called me and says, "Sean, how you doing?" So I just told him exactly what was going on. I told him that I was really suffering. I hadn't slept in 5 days. I'm getting really confused at work. I couldn't read paragraphs because I forget what I was reading. It was and I was having really bad. But I basically just summarised what I just said to you. Pretty much, I'm suffering. I need help. And his next words were, that's really sad. Well, if you don't sort your work file out, you're going to be kicked off of. I was on A team at the time. You're going to be kicked off a team. This was 2 years ago, but it just goes to show you that they don't give a fuck, mate. This was a very weak supervisor by all accounts, but he chose to say that to me and basically kick me when I'm down, even though I literally just told him how I was feeling, literally. And so that was that, man. It basically telling you more that you already know. I'm sorry for wasting your time if it was that, but yeah, that's my experience of it. I got and just because the trim officer said that she got about 7 years in, I've got about 7 years in now as well.
So I hope you could hear that okay, but we basically there had an officer say they've been to a really traumatic incident, someone hit by a train, which thankfully I never had to go to any of them, but I know some colleagues that did. and it sounded horrendous for what they said. So we have really horrendous incident, and then when someone opens up about their mental health to the supervisor, said that they're struggling as a result, they're basically told, well, that's a shame, but if you don't get your workload sorted, you're going to get kicked off the team. Like, firstly, to the supervisor who would have told the officer that, you should not be a supervisor. If that's your attitude, you should not be a supervisor, because that's disgusting. And that comes off the back of an officer who sent me a message of a similar nature, that they were in for 7 years and they were told, they were a trim practitioner, and they were told, essentially, get back out. We don't care if you're suffering PTSD. And then they had an absolute, for want of a better phrase, a complete mental fucking breakdown. Now, Ian, you're very hot on the space when it comes to police mental health and PTSD, and so what would your advice be to that officer who sent that in?
Well, I think the first thing is I wouldn't be taking what that sergeant and that supervisor said as anything. I'd be going elsewhere within the job straight away. Even maybe going to the Fed or going to the inspector and saying, look, I'm highlighting these things that I've dealt with through the job, and I'm saying that I am not in a fit state to be at work for whatever reason, and I need some help. Now, you'd like to think that you're not going to get that duplicated again, because, like you say, that should never happen. It should be a case of, you know what, okay, thank you for highlighting it, thank you for speaking up, because that's the hardest bit. We have too many people that don't say anything because they don't want to speak out due to fear, or maybe a little bit of embarrassment, when it should never ever be an embarrassment at all. And when you put your hand up, it should be a case of the job should be putting their arm around you, not doing that. Worrying about a workload that means absolutely nothing. And the only reason they're worrying about the workload is because it affects them. And this is what we were talking about earlier. That sergeant doesn't want to go to the inspector and say, oh, our workload's been affected. That's all they're bothered about. But it should be, we're forgetting about the human being behind what the uniform is. I always say to people, don't think that the uniform is some sort of shield. It actually makes you more susceptible than you think, because you're seeing and dealing with more than anybody else. I mean, the other thing for me is that a lot of the time we will focus on the job and we'll say the job doesn't do enough around well-being and mental health. But in this case, the job sadly is being let down by one person here, and it's that sergeant. The job can't do anything about that because they've put their trust in that supervisor to supervise this person effectively, and they haven't done it. So it's like what I always say, you could have the best Lamborghini in the world, but if it's in a garage and no one knows about it, then it's completely pointless. And to me, that's what police wellbeing is all about. If you don't have supervisors that can identify triggers and can identify behaviours and can't signpost effectively, then we're losing at the very first hurdle. Because there are police forces out there that have got some really, really good things in place. But if you can't signpost it effectively, you've got weak supervisors that don't recognise the signs and don't do it effectively. They're not going to be able to get access to it. So this is where the disconnect is massively for me, because you've got to have good supervisors that are willing to signpost and give the correct support. And if you haven't got it, the whole system fails. And and I do feel that the forces at times are trying to do things tied behind the backs. The key to everything is the supervisors. If your supervisors can identify things and can signpost things effectively, then it's on the organisation. Do you know what I mean? If I've done everything I've done, but then the signposting, takes too long or it's not good, then that's on the organisation. But if you're getting that bit wrong, that's disgraceful.
I really like what you said, Dan, in relation to, at that point, this officer may be discontented with the job and believe that the job doesn't care, but it's the supervisor, it's that first port of call which has failed that officer there. And, maybe if they went to another supervisor, or they went to the Fed, or they went above the sergeant, went to the inspector and explained that, they may very well have a different reaction. So I think that's really good advice. don't just take that sergeant's word for it, because they're clearly looking after number one, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, workloads, well, that'll make me look bad. But frankly, your workload doesn't matter. Somebody else will be sat in you. If you went off sick, someone else will be sat in your chair doing your workload in, you know, in a week.
Yeah, 100%, mate.
Your
You're right.
workload, it doesn't matter. So go to someone else, and yeah, it shouldn't happen. And if we don't get, like you said, Ian, if we don't get the right people in these leadership positions, then it makes the whole organization look bad, when it could just be that supervisor isn't the best supervisor.
Yeah, yeah.
Speaking to supervisors, I had a message from somebody saying, I remember, and I believe a lot of people would like to do this. I remember telling an old inspector who enjoyed to bully new officers to take a break from being a prick every day of their fucking life. That was me kicked off beat for a while and back on response.
Yeah. Well,
How
ladies
many
and gentlemen,
people would love to say that?
well, I can guarantee probably a lot of people, but the first issue with that is that, look, there's always a way to go about it, you know, and probably saying it the way that they did probably wasn't the best way to go about it.
Yeah,
Whichever rank structure, and whether we agree with it or whether we don't, there's got to be an element of probably trying to do it in the right way. But I don't think there's anything wrong with telling somebody that their behaviour isn't right. I don't, and I don't think we should be scared of it. I'll quickly tell you a story of mine. I mean, this is probably 12 years ago now. I was on a response team. Our inspector, great guy, really, really nice. You wouldn't want to go to the wrong side of him, but he was brilliant. And he, in our briefing, said, if anyone's got any problems or you want to bring anything up about something that's gone on the shift, let us know. I thought, oh, great. So, you know, at this point, I'd probably got, I don't know, six years service. So I was one of the people that got the most service on our team. And I thought, I'll speak up. And basically, one of our acting sergeants was going out and arresting people and then calling up for the PCs to come and deal with it, and then kind of leaving it to them. And it was just causing a little bit of discontent. Like, you know, it just didn't feel the right way to kind of go about things. So at the end of the briefing, I said, well, look, can I just bring this up? And as I started going, I wasn't being rude, disrespectful. I was saying, look, this is what's going on. And he just looked at me, and then my other colleague, my partner, was doing the same, was saying it. And he just looked at us and went, stop. I'll speak to you after. And I thought, oh dear, that hasn't gone well. And
no.
everybody left the room, and we were both sat down, and he just started screaming at us, don't you ever question my sergeants, you know, in front of me. And he threw a table at us.
Fuck off.
Yeah, threw a table at us. Didn't hit us or anything like that, but you know when you.
Oh, well, that's good then.
Yeah, bonus. But like you quickly realised, what the hell? You know, I actually said to him, I said, well, you told us to say something. He went, no, but you're not going to question my sergeants. That's not the. And you know what? Maybe he was right, but it kind of highlighted to me sometimes keeping yourself quiet is the right thing to do. But the funny thing about it was he did that, and as we left the room, he just looked at us and he went, "We'll never speak about that ever again. Carry on with you. Carry on with your day. You're doing a great job." That was the end of it. Never spoke about it ever again.
I mean, talk about a bait and switch.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I mean, you know what though? Despite that, I've got a lot of time for him. Actually, he was a very, 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 actually surprisingly a nice guy, good inspector. You wanted to work for him, but yeah, sometimes shouting up, even if you do it in the right way, probably sometimes in the police isn't going to be the right way to go about it.
Well, I mean,
shouldn't be that way at all. You know, I think we should be able to say to, you know, any rank really, you're not doing that right, or you know, I don't agree with that. But sadly, I don't think policing set up for it. And it should be, because I think the right leaders would appreciate it, to be honest. I've had some brilliant leaders over the years who, you would say it and they go, you know what? No, you're right. Actually, there, I take that on board.
Mhm.
And I think, look, you're not going to be right every time. Just because I say it doesn't mean it's right. I could be totally off the mark. And I would expect the leader to say to me, no, you're off the mark there. But, thank you for bringing it to my attention. But this is the reason why I can't do it. Or this is the reason why I don't agree with what you're saying. To me, that's
Mhm.
that's part of adulthood. And that's the way that we should be. But I don't think policing is in a position at the minute to allow you to do that.
I had a old sergeant who he would never write you up unless it was something major. But if it was just like a bit of a, you'd messed up at a job or you'd done something, he wouldn't say anything in front of everybody. And what had happened is you'd be walking, you walk past him and just, oh, just you got 2 secs in the back room. You'd be like, oh fuck, what have I done? And he'd give you a bollocking. Away from everybody else, he'd just give you a dressing down and bollock you and tell you what you've done wrong. And then he might put you on a shit job or tell you to make him a brew, something like that. And like that was the end of it. But equally, if you went to him and you had an issue, he'd have you back 100%.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
when he said no, you knew he meant it for a reason. He wasn't just being an ass. And they had an inspector who was the same as well. If you went to him and said, boss or sergeant, I've got an issue here. If it was a genuine issue and they listened to it and they gave an opinion, you respected that opinion because you know that if they didn't agree with it, they would tell you. And if they did agree with it, they would support you. So it just comes to open leadership with that, I think. But throwing a table at you is a bit, a bit of an overreaction, isn't it?
mate,
So,
mate, he was super, great guy. I mean, look, if that happened now, they'd probably I might be uproar, wouldn't they? But you know,
oh yeah.
but yeah, it's top guy. I mean, bizarre, really. He threw a table at me, but I still think he's a great guy.
Well, I like that story. That's quite funny. Um, Terrible, but funny.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so this is one. This is quite a long one here, but I think this highlights quite a lot of the frustrations which we're facing at the minute in the service. So, last night was one of those shifts that makes me question what the hell we're even doing anymore. I was on a late shift, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., just before handover, the time when everybody suddenly finds a reason why they can't possibly go to that last job. I got sent to a grade one domestic call. A female had rung up, whispering down the phone, asking for help. When we got there, she didn't want to let us in. At first, she was resistant, paranoid, worried, but with some reassurance and persuasion, she opened the door. Straight away, you could see she was upset, scared, and intoxicated, but not enough to mask her fear. We searched the house and she was on her own. But then we noticed something wasn't right. She was limping and visibly in pain. Eventually, we convinced her to show us her injuries: 2 massive lumps, serious bruising on her shoulder and leg, the kind of injuries you don't get for just falling over, the kind you know instinctively are from violence. We tried to get her to open up, but she wouldn't say much at first. But eventually, piece by piece, she told us she feels trapped, that if she leaves, she'll get beaten, that she doesn't trust us because the last time the police attended, her abuser was told by officers that it was her who called. Imagine that. You find the courage to reach out and the system betrays you. No wonder she's terrified. She still denied being assaulted, but she couldn't explain her injuries. She was paranoid, constantly checking the window, shushing us whenever she thought she heard something outside. That's not paranoia, that's someone living in constant fear. And then, while I was on the phone to supervisors, he came back. Just walked up like nothing was wrong. I arrested him on the spot, got him through custody just about. And you know what? I didn't clock off at 10. I stayed on, stayed until 3:30 in the morning. My colleague and I both practiced, both producing statements, clipping every second of body worn footage, sitting with her, trying to build trust, some kind of rapport, anything that might give her a little strength. She stayed withdrawn, scared, but at least she was talking. I thought maybe, just maybe, this could be one of those that we managed to push through as a victimless prosecution, where we take the weight off her shoulders and carry it for her, where where we sh- where we show her we've got her back. I came back the next day at 2 p.m. and found the entire incident had been no further actioned. That's it. Hours of work, a terrified victim, clear injuries, our instincts screaming the truth, but it was all for nothing. And this is the part that eats away at me. I felt like I got it so wrong, like I'd misread everything, like my instincts, my guts, my training, all of it counted for nothing. Because if I was right, then how the hell does a case like that just vanish into no further action? This was because this is what breaks us. This is what makes officers feel so jaded and so bitter. We do everything, stay late, fight the fight, build the case, only for the system to shrug and walk away. We talk about victimless prosecutions like there's some kind of silver bullet, but let's be real, they're not. They almost never stand up. CPS don't want to risk it. Courts don't want to back it, and the abuser walks free, probably smug, knowing he's untouchable. So where does that leave us? Why does that leave her back at square one? No justice, no protection. How have we got to this point? How has justice become so weak, so watered down, that even when the evidence is staring us in the face, we can't hold anyone to account? Is it lack of resources, risk aversion from the CPS, a system more worried about conviction rates and protecting people? All I know is nights like that make me question everything, question why we fight so hard, sacrifice our time, our energy, our health to protect people when the system isn't built to protect them. We didn't fail her, the system did, but it feels like I failed her and it feels like I was so wrong.
Powerful, isn't it, that?
Very powerful. And I think that encapsulates a lot of the frustrations what cops feel because I mean, firstly, if that officer's listening, you did nothing wrong. You did your absolute best and you did exactly what officers are meant to do. Unfortunately, as first responders, when we step away, we do everything we can. And when we step away, it's out of our hands. And then we have to look at the CPR. And I remember thinking about this because I've had loads of jobs like this where I've been off late and I've really put my time and effort into a DA case because that was what I was quite passionate about and dealing with it because I've obviously been through it myself. So I used to give the fucking world and more when it came to protecting the victim of DA. And you do all that work and you come in the next day and they they didn't get remanded, they got bailed and there's no further action or they're just NFA'd on the spot. And you really can feel so discontented. But I wonder how many of those cases would result in a charge if the CPS lawyer making the decision to NFA was the one who had to break the news to the victim. Because at the minute, the cops present the evidence, the CPS are generally quite faceless now. And then you get an email back saying no further action with a bit of a rationale. And then you've then got to ring up the victim and say, hi, sorry, he's on his way home.
I think the big thing there, mate, is the fact that if something was to go wrong, it wouldn't be the CPS that would be in the shit.
Yeah.
If those officers had turned up to that job and it was all on body cam, and it sounds like they did a fantastic job, by the way.
Absolutely.
Let's not scout over the fact that sounds like awesome police work. That should be recognised. You've gained the trust of a vulnerable victim who probably doesn't want to speak out, and you've been able to identify, which clearly is, a something that needs safeguarding. You've taken the action to make the arrest, but let's just hypothetically say that they didn't make the arrest, and it's all on body cam. You walk away. You do I don't know whether that force in particular would do a domestic abuse non-crime bonkers, but that's what we used to do.
Domestic abuse non-crime? I've never even heard of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, in West Mids, that's what they used to do. Domestic. I don't know whether they still do them, to be honest. I don't know. Being on traffic 7 years, I didn't do them once. But yeah, we used to do them. So so what you're basically saying with that is something's happened, but we can't identify a crime, but we're going to put something in the system anyway. And so let's just hypothetically say that you do that, and then the next day she's dead. I'll tell you now that them two officers would be hauled over the coals.
Into right.
Do you know what I mean? So don't ever put your head on the pillar for those two officers that have been out and think that you've done anything wrong, because you've done everything right. You've gone above and beyond. You've looked after your safety in terms of your job. You've looked after the safety of the victim. And let's be brutally honest, you've also done the right thing by the job. You've made your police service, in my opinion, look good. Because some police officers out there that wouldn't have done a thing there.
Yeah. Oh, she's not making a complaint. It won't go anywhere. All right.
So for me, as disappointing as it is, you've done everything right, and that's what you've got to take solace from, that you've done everything that in your possible power. The reason why the CPS make their decision, let them decide it. What needs to happen is we need to hold them to account by saying, well, you know what, if you're going to make that decision, let's have a little bit of rationale, proper rationale, not this three-liners, why you're not going to do something. Because without that, they can make whatever decision they want. I had it, right, whereby whilst on traffic, we had a pursuit whereby the guy tried to go the wrong way down the motorway, down the slip road. I've made tactile contact with him, so putting my safety on the line. We've eventually got him in custody and the NFA'd him. Now, how can that not be a dangerous drive? How can he not be? But you know what? It wasn't the CPS. They actually NFA'd it based on the officers, the sergeants NFA'd it, and I questioned it, and eventually got overturned to a dangerous drive. But sometimes policing does its own legs in certain circumstances like that. And I do think it's down to the fact that there is so little numbers out there. There is so much pressure to do various different things. And I think sometimes the realities get in the way of making good decisions. But that isn't anything down to policing there that's happened. That's everything down to external organisations making decisions that are bonkers.
It upsets me, mate, because the CPS and the police bang on like crazy about DA, and quite rightly so. And the cops seem to be the one who won't, like, the only ones who got the memo with it. Like, the cops go, okay, well, yeah, we need to do this, this, and this. All right, they're not supporting an investigation. We'll lock up anyway, and we will. You know, you can tell, can't you? Like, they're not supporting the prosecution, not because nothing's happened and it's one of them. It's no, something has happened and they're genuinely just bloody terrified. And you do all your res geste training and all your safeguarding and your things to do and how to write a proper statement and how to click your body warm and everything else. And you submit it to the CPS. But then by the end of that, there's a CPS lawyer who just gets the file through. They review it for an hour or 2 hours, look over it, and they go, right, well, I've got 10 other cases waiting for me. So out of them 10 cases, how many am I likely going to get a conviction over? Because they're graded on their own charging statistics and everything else as well, aren't they? So it takes the humanity out of it. And I know that you have to be objective and they have to look at what's right and what's. It's not even the case of what's right. Like, we know that something's happened there. We know that what the officers saw, what the officers heard, what the officers captured is more likely than not exactly what's happened. And then it all anchors on what kind of charge rates or statistics the lawyers managed to has got, and it takes the humanity out of it. You'd like to think any decent CPS lawyer would go, you know what, it might get NFA'd at court, or he might get a plea deal, or he might get fucking found not guilty, but I can't go home knowing. And I've had a CPS lawyer say that to me once, actually, and I got a lot of respect for them, because I sent a case through very similar to this, didn't want to make a statement. The lad got locked up and I went to absolute town on it, and it was a victimless prosecution initially. She provided the statement later down the line, but I managed to get him remanded as well, because I managed to stay on the phone and basically argue the toss with the CPS lawyer, because she was like, there's no way I'm going to charge this. Why can't we bail? Why can't we do this? And I managed to explain it in such a way that the lawyer went, okay, well, give me an hour. Let me review it all properly. Ran me back and was like, yeah, I can't. This might get NFA'd. He might get kicked out of court in the morning, and I might get a shitty email off the magistrate. But I can't go home knowing that, you know, this person is just going to leave. So she actually racked on 10 charges for him. So she went, fuck it, I'll just charge him with everything. And again, even after all that investigation, he walked away with a suspended sentence after 2 years of investigation. And this guy had strangled her and done it absolutely. And you know what I mean? So even if they do charge, there's the frustration there when you do such a good job and you keep everyone on board, and then they don't even see the inside of a prison cell at court.
I think the one that I got told by my sergeant was, he said, look, don't get involved in the politics of it. Go do your job, do it to the best of your ability, and whatever they decide, let them decide it. But if you
Yeah.
can put your head on the pillow every night, knowing that you did the best you possibly could, you know what, you've done all right. Look, that's great advice, but to try and implement that into a police officer is absolutely it's impossible. The amount of times I've come back and been absolutely furious with the fact of the decision, and it plays on your mind because you're sitting there thinking, well, how can that possibly be the case? But he is right, undoubtedly. You know, if you can remove yourself from the politics of it and accept the fact that sometimes these things are outside your control, you'll be a lot better.
Yeah, 100%. And it's easier said than done, but I think you'll have I don't know, you'll be happier
Yeah.
if you understand that once you relinquish control, it's outside of your control. We'll move on to the good news story. So it's recently been International Dogs Day. And this is a chance to recognise incredible work of police dogs, partners who track suspects, find missing people. I love watching videos of police dogs chasing after people. I don't know if I'm a bit sadistic or whatever, but I love seeing a good boy do a good job and catch someone. And there's also a charity called the Thin Blue Paw Foundation who are pushing hard, and I hadn't heard of these until recently, are pushing hard to make sure that these loyal companions are looked after once they retire. Because once they're discharged from the police service, and the police kind of hold their hands up, don't they, any vet bills and everything else. And they're even campaigning for them to get their own doggy police pension once they retire.
Nice.
I think that's absolutely brilliant. I love that.
Yeah, well, it is good because the work of police dogs genuinely is fantastic, isn't it? Well, look, you know, you've got to give the handlers an awful lot of credit, but
Hmm.
you turn up at a job and you know there's a police dog there. One, you stay clear of it, but secondly, you know that your chances of potentially getting the offenders are probably increased, which is great. So they deserve to be looked after, don't they?
I remember a dog handler helping us to find some, I don't know, thieves on or burglars, whatever it was. Help us doing their research. And anyway, we caught him and all the rest of it. And I went up to the lady who had the police dog and I said, "Oh, is your dog friendly?" She went, "Yeah, he's dead friendly." And I went to stroke him and he nearly ripped my arm off. And she went, "Oh, no, not to you. He'll rip your arm off. But to me, he's friendly to me." So lesson learned there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so absolutely. So I'll stick the link to that charity if anyone wanted to support it to get the doggies their own little doggy pensions. So I think amazing. And Ian, you mentioned about Oscar Kilo. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Oscar Kilo for us to finish on?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I think is needed in policing is to have better access to mental health support. And I know that Oscar Kilo have recently launched a 24-hour line that officers can ring and get immediate support. And for me, it's something that's been massively overdue. It's something that I think is needed, and I think it could help a lot of people. We all know that, sadly, depending on where you are in the country and what force you're with, will depend on what level of service you get in relation to your health and your well-being. You know, sometimes you can go to one force and they do it really well, and then in other forces, for whatever reason, their infrastructure is not as good, and you don't get supported as well. And I find that absolutely absurd. Depending on where you are in the country, will depend on what level of service you get. Crazy. Whereas this is open to all officers, and I believe staff members as well. I've got no affiliation to Oscar Kilo at all, but I just think it's a really great service that's been kind of launched to help officers and staff members to get that support when you really do need it. Do I think there's still probably going to be an element of apprehension around it? Of course there will, because I think police officers and people that work with the police are probably, you know, we question everything. You know, is it going to be, you know, confidential? Is it? But you know what? For me, it's a real step forward, and I would encourage anybody to, if you are struggling and you do need that immediate support, reach out to it. You know, if you don't try, you'll never know. And Oscar Kilo have launched it, I think, and the only way that people are going to be able to see whether it's going to work is by using it.
By using it, absolutely.
One of the biggest things that everyone always says is, well, there's a stigma about me reaching out. Well, if you've got a line that isn't linked to your force and is confidential, to me, that's a massive, massive win. So, for me, that's a very good news story that deserves to have, it's spoken about.
I think that's excellent. And we'll definitely, like I said, put the links to Oscar Kilo in this episode. And by all means, guys and gals, if you are struggling, you just need someone to talk to, just fucking reach out. You can't lose, you can't hurt to speak to somebody. So, Ian, been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on. And
no problem. I've enjoyed it.
Well, we'd love to have you on again at some point in the future. Keep sending me your stories, keep sending me your rants, keep sending me your accolades, the good, the bad, the ugly of everything else, of police work, of emergency service workers in general. Love to hear it. And the links to do that are all in the description. Until next time, see you later.